Hi, it's Lucky again. And I just recently published a Flutter package called FlutterTagger. And what it does is it allows for you to extend text fields to give them this tagging ability. So you make your text field, um, you basically give your text field power to be able to do things like user mentions and hashtags and create that visual distinct English is hard, creates that um, visual distinctiveness or distinction. Yeah, that's the right word, distinction. Between the texts that are tag text or your user mentions and hashtags and every other text in your text field. When I shared this with my community, FlutterTagger, it got some response, got some comments. Obviously there were people congratulating me for doing this, and there were also people who thought that this was over-engineered. After they read the code, I presumed they thought it was over-engineered. And I had conversations with one of them to understand how I may have over-engineered this, because I have been working on this project for a year now, not actively, but yeah, I'm working on it for a year on and off. And so I think that if there was a better way to do it, or if there was a simpler way to do this, I would have caught on a long time ago. But I also recognized my bias because I've spent so much time doing this. So I may be stuck in a specific part that might not be the simplest part. So I was curious. I wanted to know how they thought this was over-engineered. And I started to have this conversation with them. And what I discovered was there seems to be a misconception and that misconception comes from the demo, the video demo in the README for that package. You'll see what I mean now in a second. Right, here we go. So in this demo, you can see how the package works. Typing into your text field and using the @ symbol as a trigger character for your user mentions. You can do a user search and you can tag a specific user from the list, the view that shows your search results, and you can remove tagged users. It highlights the tag before you can remove it so that you know and you can confirm you want to perform the action. But I think what's confusing is the text part, not the text field. In the text, you can see that the text have different styles. There's a concept called linkifying, where using certain packages like Linkify or Linkify text, you can make text clickable. You can make links clickable, links in your text clickable. So things like URLs, emails, phone numbers, user mentions, hashtags, you can make them clickable. So this demo combines those two concepts, but the demo is supposed to show and demonstrate FlutterTagger, which is not tied to Linkifying in any ways. It's not tied to it. Although you do have to use one of these Linkify options when you want to display text that your user has inputted your user has inputted using FlutterTagger, right? So yeah, you want to show how this text looks in your text field. You want that to be the same way in your UI, in your text widgets. So I do get the confusion if that's the case. But I do maintain, I got another comment that said my use of try is over engineering. And I'm going to explain all of the decisions that I made in this for this package. All right, so I'm going to pull up my notes so that I'm on track. So why FlutterTagger? I was working on a product that had a timeline feature where users can post to your timeline. And we wanted to make it engaging so that users can mention other people on the platform on their posts. And the implication of that is that post becomes a part of the other user who you have mentioned, and it becomes a part of their feed, their personal feed. So it shows up in their feed, they get notified, that sort of thing. Also in the comments, we wanted to enable user mentions, but the focus for the first iteration was the posts, timeline posts. And so I remember spending the first few days when I was building this feature, researching how the text field works. My first thought process, was to figure out how the text field delegated the painting of the text in the text field, and see if I can pass in a different style for that text field. Because the biggest issue was that you can have a one of the biggest issues was that you can have your tags in your text field, but they are not visually separate or different from every other text in the text field. So if I wanted to tag a user whose name was Frank and I typed @Frank, it doesn't look, the style is the same as every other text that I have in that same text field. So that was the first problem that I wanted to solve. How do I make @Frank look different? Maybe have a different color, maybe a different font weight if I want, from every other text in the text field. And so I started to look at the text field, and then I started looking at lines of code for the editable text widget to see if I can sort of make my own custom editable text widgets. That was the plan. That was the thought process. And while I was doing this, 4,600-ish lines deep into the file for the editable text, I found how the editable text delegates the construction or the building of the text spans that are used to paint the text in your text field. So I think that I should show this. Yeah, I think it's a bit better if I show this. So okay. Where's the build method? Okay, I should be looking in the text field and not text form field. Okay, so I'm just going to create a text field just so I can get into the code for this. Right. And then the text field returns editable text somewhere down here. Let's yeah. Right. So this is what the text field returns, an editable text widget. 4,000 lines into this code is you find a method called build text span. Right, what am I doing? Yes, is it this one? 4,200. Right, that's it. That's the one. So this is responsible for building the text span that along with the styles and every other thing for the text that is painted in your text field. So if you're using a text form field and you set this obscure text to true and you pass in your obscuring character, yeah, it will construct a text span for the text in your text field, replacing each of those characters with your obscuring character. And you have things here for spell check corrections, or suggestions rather. But when you don't have any of these things going on, when the operating system is not providing spell check suggestions and there is no composition going on, and you don't have you don't have obscured characters, when none of that is happening, this editable text delegates the construction of the text spans to your controller, the text editing controller that is attached to that text field. So that means there is this guy, the build text span, in the text editing controller. And when I found this, it made my approach to this different. It made me see things differently. It meant that I do not need to create a custom editable text widget just to pass a different style to it. It meant to me that I could extend the text editing controller and override this build text span to return text span that has a different style for text in my text field that are tags and the default style for the other texts, right? So this was the first turning point. This was the first thing that I saw, and then I decided I figured, okay, I have a base that I can start up with, and I would stick to this. It made things a lot simpler. So we've gone through the part of the journey where I mentioned my thought process and finding the text editing controllers build text span method. And I did some demos and discovered that it actually works. I can use simple pattern matching to find text that match some specific pattern in my text field and style them differently. Something like this is going to be in a video that should be up by the time you're watching this. It should be already available on my channel. The Exciting Flutter Show, the first episode of the Exciting Flutter Show, talks about this exact same thing that I'm talking about here. Okay, so, but this is not the only thing that I need from my solution, right? I want to be able to add tags. And what that means for my backend server, for instance, is that the text that comes out of that text field should be formatted in a way that the tag has some kind of, it's recognizable. So it's not just @Frank, for instance, but something like @Frank hashtag the user ID. Just a pattern that the backend can recognize. It's just something that we some agreement between the Flutter front end and the backend to watch out for this, to use the same pattern. And the reason is, remember the purpose of user mentions in this app that I was building. We want to be able to notify users when they are mentioned, and we also want to be able to associate that post where they are mentioned in their own feed. So we want to tie users with their ID. So we had to format each tag in our text field to contain the user ID. That's a lot easier, instead of doing some expensive search on the backend side to find a user ID given their username. Okay, so that's one part, formatting the text. Also, you know that the text, that this formatted text will not be shown anywhere. It's just something that is passed behind the scenes when you're sending the data from your text field to your server, for instance, through a network call. So that's something else. That's another requirement to keep in mind. You want to format these tags. We also want to be able to delete text after tagging a user, for instance. We want to be able to drag the cursor back all the way to the front of the tag, add text, remove text, and the tag position will be maintained. The tag is not thrown out of position. And we also want to be able to have what I call nested tags. So something like this, I could have these are separate words, but when I remove the space between them, they are joined, right? And they're all still recognized as tags. In the first iteration of FlutterTagger, this was not possible at all. This was just not possible because when you actually it was possible in the first iteration, there was no concept of the position of the tags. It was just pure pattern matching. So wherever there was an art followed by some characters, we just assumed this is a user tag, this is a user mention. So if I have at Leon, at Billy, at Brad, I can write at Leon here, and this isn't a tag, this isn't a mention. It's similar to what I have before, but this isn't a mention. It's just a text at Leon. There's no mentioning anybody because I've not associated Leon's tag, Leon's user tag to this, right? But in the first iteration of FlutterTagger, grabbing the formatted text of this text field value would pass Leon to have the ID. That's this first Leon to have Leon's username and ID, and to pass the last one to also have Leon's username and ID. So there was no way for the formatter to know which is a tag and which isn't, because it was just using pure pattern matching. So we needed something more than just pattern matching. We needed to be able to track position of tags in our text field. So we need to do pattern matching first of all, and then we not necessarily pattern matching, but in some sense maybe pattern matching, and then verify that this match that we have found falls within this offsets. It has a start index of this and has an end index of this, because I know where my tags are. And if this other text matches this pattern but does not have this start and end index, then it's just not a tag, and I don't have to format it. I just leave it as is, right? So those are that's another thing to keep in mind that came up while I was building this. Some very hold on. Right. I also wanted to be able to edit the tags rather. And I think the inspiration for this, I looked at the way user mentions worked on TikTok. Whenever you wanted to mention another user on TikTok and you are editing that text in your text field, TikTok highlights the tag or the tagged user. It highlights it first of all when you click on your back button. It highlights it and then basically prompts you to click on your back button again to remove it. And I like this. I like that feedback, that visual feedback, and I decided to incorporate it in FlutterTagger. I think on WhatsApp that doesn't happen. When you click back to erase a tag, it just disappears. But I think that you could argue that highlighting is an unnecessary step, and maybe In another version of FlutterTagger, it could be something that you opt into, but right now it's just something that you get out of the box. It's the default behavior, right? Okay, so I'm looking at my notes to make sure that I'm still on track. I've talked about how this is beyond pattern matching, right? Because if we stick to pattern matching, then we in the end we'll be formatting text that match some pattern but are not tags. Now we come to the part where we absolutely need tries, in my opinion. Maybe there's a better way to do this, but tries just made sense to me. If we did not use try, then whenever we wanted to build the text span for our text in the text field, the typical logic is to split the text by empty spaces. That's space characters, split the text by those space characters. And for each string in our list of split text, we want to find out if there is any trigger character. That's the trigger character in this demo is the @ symbol. If you are focusing on hashtags, the trigger character will be the pound symbol. So we want to find out if there's any trigger character there. If there is none, we just assume that this is not a tag or it does not contain a tag, and we style it with the default style that is passed down from the editable text widget, right? But if it contains that trigger, then there is possibly a tag in it, and we use a try to find that tag. So we go from the beginning, from the first letter in that text, and walk all the way down. If the search ends in a word or a text that has start index and end index, because that's also stored in the try, then we check that we keep the same record of where we started from outside of the try, and we validate those metrics to figure out whether that text at that position is a tag. If we do not do this with a try, this would be inefficient comparisons, most likely with a list. So if we were keeping a list of our tags instead, if you add a tag, we put into a list, right? If we're keeping that list instead, what we'll be doing is we'll be checking if whenever we find out that there is a trigger character in our text, in any split text, we look through the entire list to see any tag that matches that text in our split text. And this is an O of N operation. And it's really expensive, but with your try, you don't necessarily have to do that much operations. I believe that the try is very efficient at finding what you need fast, and when you don't, it just moves on to the next one. Right. And the try is even more valuable when you have things like this nested tags. So at Leon, at Billy, at Brad, they are one word when you split this text by an empty space. And you want to be able to find all of them and identify them as tags. If you use a list to hold all of your tags as opposed to a tree data structure like a try, you would need to do some recursive function call to further split this word, split it by the trigger character. Although that's something that already happens in the implementation for the try. It splits it by the trigger character and then walks down that try to find out if each of those words actually exist as words as entries in the try. But if you're using your list, it's more exhaustive than failing really fast with your try for that word. For instance, if at Leon was not in the try at all, then it will fail at the first character, L, because you can't find L anywhere in that try. Maybe it will find L assuming you added Billy before, define L, define Y, but that's the end. But Leon is expecting to continue with O and N. So it will just terminate, as opposed to searching all of your tags, Leon, Billy, Brad, and matching them. If you have more tags, then that's more things that you need to check for just one split of that text. So this is where I think that the try is more efficient. It doesn't seem intuitive, like when you look at it without really understanding the decisions that went into this, especially when you're comparing this to the Linkify packages, right? It doesn't seem necessary to have a try, but yeah, after having, in the first iteration, after storing my tags, first of all, in a map where I'm associating the tag text with the actual, I'm associating with the tag text with the ID for the tag, right? And using that alone, I found out that was very, 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 very constraining. One way it constrains you is that you cannot have multiple tags, right? Because if the tag text, for instance, is your key, or the ID, if the tag text is your key, then maybe you can have multiple tags. Yeah, right. Because the tag text, let me show you what the tag text looks like. It's just this class that contains the start index, the end index, and the text, the actual text that you're tagging, right? So you can have a different hash code depending on what these properties are. So even if it's the same text that you have in your tag, but they have different start and end indices, then yeah, that would be a different entry for your ID. But in the first iteration of this, I can't remember how I was constrained, but I knew that at some point I just could not support having multiple tags, right? Having multiple tags of the same user, tagging the same user multiple times, or mentioning the same user multiple times. I think it's also related to the issue where pattern matching doesn't work, because if I tag Frank and it's at Frank, and I write at Frank, which is not a tag, my formatter just thinks both of them are same user tags. I think so. So the try solves all of these issues that I had faced while I was building this, and it makes the search for your tags more efficient. So instead of using a list, for instance, and potentially searching through all of the items and finding no match, you go through this tree data structure where you feel really fast if the word does not exist at all. And in the worst case scenario, maybe you don't feel so fast, but most of the time you feel really fast compared to when you're looking through a list. Okay. Right, now the other thing that I need to mention here is that this package should be used with any of the Linkify options. So it might be, this is the one that I absolutely recommend, Linkify, because it is low level and allows you to write your own Linkifiers for the way your tags are structured. So in our case, we did not want to have our user tags to just be at and any other thing that follows, because we wanted to associate the tags with an ID, the user ID. So we created a pattern for our user tags, and we needed a way to be able to parse text that contains that pattern, extract the ID, and only show the username with an @ in front of it. But when you click on the ID, when you click on that text, we use the ID to navigate to the user page, fetch the user details, the user profile details, and show it to you. So this was very, very useful. There is also Linkify text, but that, in my opinion, works really well for URLs, emails, phone numbers. But when you need to do user tags, it makes an assumption for you that your tags fit some pattern. But this Linkify, I recommend it. It's very low level. You have full control. You can write your own Linkifiers. So my point is that you need to use Linkify or Linkify text together with FlutterTagger. FlutterTagger does not handle styling the text in your text widgets. All it does is it gives you your text field superpowers. So your text field can watch out for your trigger characters, whatever it is. In this case, @ for mentioning users. It watches out for that trigger. Whenever it finds it, every other string that you type after that, trigger character is sent as a search query to the callback that you provide, and then your overlay that you provide, which is a widget, is shown. If you specify an animation controller, then that overlay is animated. The opening and the closing of it is animated to give you some very nice experience. And then you can use the controller attached to the FlutterTagger, which in itself is an extension of the text editing controller, to add a tag. So whenever you click on any of the search results, you can pull the information that you want and then send it to FlutterTagger to add that tag, and it will create this. It will style that tag differently. You set the tag style for yourself as well. So that's really the foundation of what FlutterTagger is. Allows you to watch out your text field, to watch out for a trigger character, initiate a search context, right? And send queries after that trigger character for search. Also allows you to be able to format this result however you want it to be processed by your server or whoever cares about it, but still maintain this visual aesthetics for your users. So yeah, that's really all I have to talk about in this video. I do hope that you take a look at the FlutterTagger package, and yeah, let me know what you think. I don't think that it's over-engineered, but if there is something that I haven't seen or still haven't seen from what people are pointing out, I'd really like to see them. But from my conversations yet, I do not think this is over-engineered. I just think that there's some misconception where people are seeing this Linkify patterns, which is heavily used in combination with FlutterTagger, just doesn't ship with it, because I do not believe I should create my own Linkifying package when something that works really well already exists. So yeah, that's really the end of this video. Do check FlutterTagger out and let me know what you think. Catch you in the next one.